thanks I get. Hello, I started this gangsta shit. And it's the mother...
CYBERFROG, published in 1996 from Harris Comics and created by Ethan Van Sciver, a 26-year veteran of the comic book industry, and I'm not going to say the rest of his shtick. CYBERFROG was created, written, and illustrated by Ethan before he went to work for DC Comics, most notably on titles like Green Lantern and Flash Rebirth. I distinctly remember seeing this comic up on the wall at the shop back in the 90s, specifically this cover, and having no clue what any of it meant. I found out about Ethan and CYBERFROG first by going through NerdSync's Comic Misconception show on YouTube. I really love the video about Howard the Duck being stolen from Marvel, and I was interested in hearing more about the history of different characters and stories, to which the algorithm suggested diversity in comics, which then led me to Ethan's channel. Which was awesome because I spend a good amount of my free time drawing my own comic, and his channel is full of how-tos and tutorials and reviews. I think he had mentioned a few times about bringing the character back, and out of curiosity one day I bought CYBERFROG 1 and 2. Then I believe Ethan saw The Last Jedi and his channel exploded, skyrocketing the prices of these old issues. So I only have 2. I assume that most people don't have any, and I'm sure people are curious to know what it looks like, though there is a video on his channel where he goes through it page by page. But I mean, come on! I think I'm a better source for talking about his comic than the creator, ooh. Seriously, I'm listening to Ethan's commentary for this issue off and on while I write this, and it's one of the more depressing times I've ever heard someone talk about their own work. Art lesson! Everyone else in life is going to try their hardest to put you down, kids, especially about your work. You shouldn't be one of them. It's important to remain humble, but don't waste your time trashing yourself. Buckle down and do better next time. Let's get started, but I'll tell you, I'm a little worried about my spine shattering during this review. List of responsible parties. The comic starts when the Traffic Gang is threatening this woman with a knife. Yes, Traffic is the name, and Alan is my friend. Green alien word balloons talk over the action, and for some reason I hear the voice of Dennis Leary in my head. Dunkin' Donuts! This gang is an amalgam of different walks of life. You have a trucker, a teenager, an Elton John enthusiast, and an 80s helicopter show pilot. Very soon we get a shot of the namesake of this story, CYBERFROG. He's crouched menacingly on top of a building, finishing a bucket of KFC and downing a can of some kind of coffee or energy drink.
You can get every other flavor except coffee-flavored coffee!
Look at the mirrored Crumb's shoulders. That's really fun, and I feel like it would be a pain in the ass to have to do all the time. But it's cool because it kind of pushes the believability of the world by making you feel like there's more world behind you. The only way this could be more engrossing is if the reader's face was reflected back on the shoulders also. Our dark adventurer watches on high with glowing eyes, colorfully musing about repossessing the town from these creeps.
Hey, jerky!
Oh, snap! Do people still say snap? I do. I feel like it started when I was in high school and I hated it. I think Futurama got me saying it though because of Fry. Look alive! It's raining death! He shouts, and CYBERFROG springs into action to rescue the chick, stomping the Clayton's head into a junk pile with his foot. I assume the gang was named Traffic just for that title. Tangent, Ethan's mentioned recently the idea of republishing all these old books, which is awesome because I really love the 90s comics, but the color would be stripped out and replaced. That's sad because I love the color in this issue. It's great, especially on the graffiti title. Personally, I kind of hate it when they update the colors on old books. I have a few Batman trades that are reprints of like Neil Adams and stuff, and there's just something off about it. Maybe it's the gradients. And like Marvel recently put out some original Star Wars stuff from the 70s and 80s with modern colors, and I despise it. If I'm reading a comic from the 70s, I want it to look like the 70s. You can clear it up and take out that Ben-Day printing, but leave the colors alone. They didn't have gradients in the 70s. Even these classic Star Wars panels may have had their color touched up, but they still preserved the artwork. Now you are shitting on Al Williamson, one of my personal heroes and a god of the comics industry. These twerps are just photoshopping pooping all over his work. Horse. Sorry. That's my argument against recoloring. Might as well call yourself George Lucas at that point. Moving on! Oop, Ethan's signing the splash page. One of the best things about his stuff is the little details. New CYBERFROG series announced! Wow, that's like seeing history repeat itself for the 3rd time. Your total compliance, interview with death, self-inflicted brain damage as a viable alternative. Pinup Girl of the Month, Gareb Shamus. Shamus is the founder of Wizard Entertainment and used to publish Wizard Magazine. I miss Wizard. And Toy Fair. I thought it was amusing. I don't know if it's meant to be mean, but if I was doing a superhero comic, I would slip in references to my friends all the time. Also, can't leave out the direct quote from God in the Bible about frogs going up from the river and busting Skull. This first frame immediately reminded me of Todd McFarlane characters. I'm calling shenanigans on the continuity of these panels though. Unless Baldy here is walking behind Twitch, the position of the gun is on the wrong side. CyberFrog hasn't wiped the brain goo off his foot before another goon is pulling a gun on him and begins firing away. CyberFrog backhands the guy's freaking head off and then puts his foot through Elton John's torso. This ain't no Batman. A few minutes later and the gang is dispatched. Good lord, that's ridiculous. Speaking of Wizard Magazine, I feel like I've seen this guy with the comics down his throat before. The dark hair, mullet, earring, and hat. Maybe that was just the standard uniform for comic artists in the 90s. I like this bit of dialogue. The woman is horrified that he's killed all the gang members and tells him he shouldn't have killed them all. And he asks sincerely, why, did you want to rip up a couple of them yourself? I laughed. He tells her to say thanks and he'll be on his way when she flips out and calls him a toad school. CyberFrog with a lightning cloud is probably one of my favorite images in the whole book. There's another image coming up that I absolutely love. In a Looney Tunes fashion, he stuffs her in a trash can and picks up a newspaper. Me. Really, the likeness to Ethan is uncanny, and I appreciate the Plan 9 from Outer Space reference. More mutilated bodies found, I assume is what that says. More silly messages. Confession, I suck. New studies show that reading the newspaper is a blatant waste of time. Ain't that the truth? I would substitute the internet nowadays. Things change daily, says exuberant? Yono fact? I don't know what that word is. Comic book artist. Who cares? Ya cow, says Officer Matt Martin. In deep. Matt Martin used to work for Hall of Heroes. Me again! Another self-portrait of Ethan, looking a bit more haggard. CyberFrog reads of more murders that had occurred the night before, and he's angry that his homing sense didn't clue him in to go and stop it. He tears up the newspaper and jumps epically through the rain against the backdrop of lightning. Did heroes ever do that before Frank Miller in The Dark Knight Returns? Elsewhere, a wretched hive of the city. The mall. Ben Reilly is not the most popular kid, which is surprising with that staff of raw headpiece that would make Flavor Flav jealous hanging around his neck. Having stewed enough, he shouts Kali Ma and summons the power of Osiris, transforming into a nightmare which these doofuses seem unimpressed by. They are pushing Vampirella hard. Look at this. One side is an ad for Vampirella, the other side is an ad for Vampirella. I don't remember any other comic having ads that were all for one character or thing. Honestly, I don't mind. I've always liked her design for obvious reasons. And my dad grew up reading the Warren magazine comics like Creepy and Eerie, and of course, Vampirella. So when I think of those characters, I think of him. I've been considering doing a kind of creepy Warren retrospective video. I'd bring on my old co-host from the Read More Horror Comics podcast, where we were reviewing individual creepy issues in order. I'm pretty sure he's read all of them and is a fount of knowledge on the subject. Let me know in the comments if that's something that interests you guys. Splash page of impending doom. Ben makes some villainous quips about eating the head of this honor student and he chomps down. There's a shot of Ben's best Big League Chew impression and he spits out the head bragging about his nimble teeth. What? He asks the girls which one of them wants to be next, and naturally Ms. I Hate My Parents volunteers her friend. I guess he crushes both their skulls here, but they don't really show what happens to them. A news report later mentions that 3 teenagers were murdered, so I suppose Ben ate them and left behind a big pile of flesh. Ben transforms back and I don't know, I thought this was an amusing blonde joke. Typical blonde, no brains, great legs. The next morning, CyberFrog introduces us to his Fortress of Pulchritude. And yes, I had to look that up. Means beauty, apparently, despite sounding like it has something to do with a pool full of slime. And we learn that CyberFrog is not a fan of Perfect Strangers when the program is interrupted by an apathetic news reporter talking about the kids we just saw being murdered. I love CyberFrog's face being reflected in his toes here. This sets him off again and we get a brief origin story of CyberFrog waking up in a swamp fully formed. For comparison, here's a look at the origin of CyberFrog from the upcoming CyberFrog Blood Honey.
You have 20 seconds to comply.
Yeah, I'd say it's a bit more in-depth. Maybe they were saving that for issue 0. CyberFrog tells us that for 10 years he just hopped around until the first time he felt the buzz. Really? In New York City, he didn't fight crime for 10 years? I find it hard to believe that New York was a utopia for a brief span. His head is ringing like crazy and he loses control all over his body when he discovers he has boot thrusters. This is my favorite shot in the whole book. Just hurtling through the air with no control. I seriously laughed seeing this. He lands in the street where people flee in terror and this old woman starts screaming about him being a demon from hell. He gives her a shot in the mouth with his elbow, saying he's never been to hell even though he looks like it. More Vampirella. Oh snap! I think I went to this convention. He doesn't know why he was brought there, but he does reason that maybe it was to hit that old lady in the face. I like that he would give that any kind of serious consideration. Again, the reflection on the shoulders is such a clever thing to show off more of what's going on in the environment around the character. Kind of Hitchcockian. I'm going to have to use this sometime in my own stuff somewhere. I have no idea who these guys are as they leap into action, and it doesn't matter because we cut to Heather Swain taking a shortcut through the cemetery to get home. Side note, I found out from Ethan's video the cat monster is named Spite and the weird robot guy is Device. Raider of the Lost Ark, Ben Reilly appears behind her, talking menacingly and threatening her. Oh crap! Looks like it didn't work out from Matt Martin. Is this yet another crime CyberFrog missed out on? There's a side story for you. How did he die in between the newspaper coming out and this scene right here? She knees him in the crotch and Ben goes down hard. For comparison, this also appears in the forthcoming Blood Honey, with less ball-kneeing emphasis. Ben wants her even more to be with, to eat. I don't know, but he wants her. Back at the Riley compound, Ben's mother sings Onward Christian Soldier as she puts a load of laundry outside his door. I like the tentacles sucking back inside the door when she mentions having fresh underwear. Even Demon Spawn recognize the benefits. She leaves the laundry there and goes. Stuff is flying around Ben's room like poltergeists, including a book by Ethan Van Sciver called I Hate Everyone. Man, no wonder Ben's got problems. He works himself up into a fit over Heather again and throws a skull through the window. Karish! His mother peeks in, having heard a karish, and Ben is out the window and on the move. That's a pretty cool looking angle going out of the window, but his position makes me think that he's flying drunk. And that's it for issue 1. Come back in 60 days for issue 2. I'm 90% sure I don't have the correct issue 2. I have some commemorative edition black and white comic, and if it is the real one, then the writing between the 2 issues is terrible because it makes no sense. Pretty sure it's something else. Looks awesome though. What the hell? Issue 0? What issue are we on? Interview page with the creator! Jeez, look at this guy. He looks like my big brother. Does he have frogs on his shoulders? Oh, I see, it's just one frog. Geez, the lighting is terrible with that hard shadow right behind him. Harris legal disclaimer. I guess they didn't like that comment about Satan always being there for him. Even in Ethan's commentary, he skips over some of what I assume is the more embarrassing answers in this interview. Vampirella ad. Next is a letters page. Is it possible to trigger an epileptic seizure through type? I feel like that's what they're attempting with this every other letter is capitalized horse. This is hilarious to me. I've heard people ask Ethan about reading these old stories before reading the new one, and he said the exact same thing about the Hall of Heroes ones. Basically, they're bad and you don't need them, he's starting over again. Reading the letters page, there's this little thing. Since the comic was technically brand new, they used mail they had received about the Hall of Heroes run. I'm not sure what the apology comic was, or why Tim Seeley, comic book artist, is gently scolding him, or what their current relationship is now. Ethan describes his work ethic of doing the job and making jokes to get a rise out of people. The big takeaway I got from this is that Ethan appears to have been consistent in who he is for the last 25 years, at least. Now, what I really want to know is, can we squeeze another Vampirella ad into this comic? Oh snap! Double page spread! I've actually been thinking about buying this first issue with its red foil cover for a little while now, but here's something serendipitous. Last night I went to an awesome used bookstore near me and I came across this! The trade paperback of this series for $3.50. Coming home and looking it up on eBay, the only one I saw was $22. Wrapping it up! So the comic is fun and a little bonkers and all over the place, but, you know, it's the 90s. It's not meant to change the world, it's just meant to entertain. So what did I learn that I can apply to my own comic? Humor and fun. It's missing from comics now. Comics used to be aimed at the young and the young at heart, therefore you were allowed to be silly once in a while. That's how we ended up with things like Throg and Spider-Ham and Melf, the elf with a gun. People seem to sometimes act like comics are the most important thing ever, and that they have to die on some hill for them. But they're comics. Batman and Robin got tied to a giant piano for crying out loud. Humor and fun is missing from a lot of comics now, and I blame the combination of college courses trying to make a big deal out of them combined with the corporatization of nerd culture. I'm a person that believes in balance, though I struggle to practice it myself, and I think the 90s were just right. All this stuff was beloved, but still just obscure enough to stay humble? Humble? Maybe that isn't the right word. Now, it's not that you shouldn't do serious comics, and I'm not saying I'm going to turn the hero of my own stories into a koala bear out of the blue, though maybe I'd introduce that in some kind of parody what-if type comic in the future. But comics can be weird and fun seems to be the last thing anyone cares about now. Except for the Dynamite books I'm subscribed to, like Elvira, Betty Page, and Mars Attacks. Those are fun. And the new Conans, I like those a lot too right now. So what did I learn that I can apply to my own work? Fun. Just make the comic fun. That's it, folks. Subscribe, like, and comment. I'll see you soon with a new old review. Thanks. Bye. Ah, my spine!